Hello, and welcome to the SHS podcast, where we provide valuable information for business owners and entrepreneurs. Today, we're fortunate to have Ryen Rasmus on with us here. He is an attorney, a senior attorney with Lipp Law Firm. And thank you, Ryen, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Well, would love to start off and tell us a little bit about yourself. Who do you work for? Who are you? That type of stuff.
Sure. So, like Steve said, my name is Ryen Rasmus. I'm an attorney with the Lipp Law Firm out of Fairfax, Virginia. Our firm is a business and employment firm. We help all types of businesses from a startup in their garage, working with a laptop, all the way up to very large government contractors with people all over the world. So we're well versed in all types of issues that can come up, irrespective of what kind of business you have, whether you're a dog walker, whether you're a high-powered exec. And at any point in the business life cycle, whether you're starting out mid-range or whether you're looking to sunset. So we cover a lot of ground, which is great for our clients because of the fact that irrespective of where you are in the cycle, it's always good to know where you've been, sort of look back and also know where you want to go. And because we work with businesses in all of those stages and in many different fields, the breadth of knowledge is pretty high. And as different as businesses are, there are a lot of similarities, probably more similarities than there are differences, especially when it comes to the law, because the law oftentimes thunders down from the mountain and doesn't care, what kind of a business you are. And that's particularly true with some of the more recent laws that we've seen come down during the present health situation. So it's a great equalizer, the law, in many circumstances. And so irrespective of what kind of a business you run, we're often in a good position to sort of look at things and lend advice.
And so you, I guess, and the law firm, you guys have quite a bit of just diverse experience across the spectrum. So if you're a business owner, it's almost like a one-stop shop where you're able to really provide legal advice and guidance across a broad array of topics and issues that a business owner could face.
That's right. Yeah, because when it comes down to it, we're most interested in solving problems, right? People come to us oftentimes not because everything's fine and fancy free. It's oftentimes because they have something that has come up, and they're seeking out some advice from somebody whose business it is to know answers to those questions. I'm not an accountant. I don't do my own taxes. I'm not a mechanic. I don't fix my own car. And so it's a good idea if something sounds under the hood like it might be something you want to take a look at. It's good to know that there's somebody to whom you can go who may have that piece of knowledge and whom you trust to give you a straight, fair answer. And it's true. At the end of the story, what we're looking to do is just get people back to that place of equilibrium. Hopefully, we're like the dentist. You only need to see us, once or twice a year, if that, just to make sure everything's running smooth. And oftentimes it is. Oftentimes what a person who it doesn't have a background in law will perceive as a big, terrifying, horrible issue will be something that we can look at and say, now, this is either not an issue at all or has a really easy fix. And that's always what we aim for. Simpler is always better.
Well, we're fortunate. A lot of our viewers, are entrepreneurs, and they're always willing to seek out expert, right? Expert advice. And I think that's what's made a lot of them very successful, right? So you go to the folks that know their stuff, and you try not to be yourself, everything, or resolve things. Was it penny wise and pound foolish? I mean, in the end, our viewers are smart enough to know that they know what they don't know, and they seek that advice from experts. So that being said, today is a real interesting topic, even for myself as a business owner, right? So we want to talk about, what are the potential ramifications of, returning to office and requiring or not requiring the vaccine shots for your employees and what that could do. We hopefully don't put you on the spot here, but any advice you guys can give me? Can you require that your employees get a vaccine shot before returning to the office? Is that even legal to require that?
Yeah, it's a great question, one that's been coming up. Obviously, there are a lot of diverse opinions out there about whether and how to get the shot, whether you could get it even if you wanted it. And so to answer your question point blank, the short answer is yes. If to the extent that an employer wants to make the vaccine a requirement of returning to the physical workspace, there is the potential for them to do that. The EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal body that sort of oversees our body of law that has to do with workplace discrimination and special conditions in the workplace, has been issuing guidance on a sort of periodic basis ever since the health situation started to evolve in March and April of last year. And they actually drew on their previous guidance from the H1N1 pandemic that broke out several years ago. At that time, people were concerned. They didn't know what the disease looked like. They didn't know how to take precautions. And so EEOC stepped in and said, there are a lot of laws out there that could potentially give people pause, have them ask questions, things like Title VII, which deals with sort of your workaday discrimination in the workplace based on things like age and race and gender and things like that. And also the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which for the most part says your health is your business. To the extent that you want to put your employer on notice about a health condition or something like that, that's your prerogative. You can do that. And you can ask for accommodations to make it easier to do your job based on your health situation. And your employer needs to respond accordingly. But they looked at this body of law and they said, what, this body of law is intended to operate in the abstract, right? In an all things being equal type of world. And so what we need to get down to is what they call the public policy that underlies these laws. Like, why do these laws exist? And at the end of the story, they exist to protect people, right? And that protection is not just sort of airy-fairy legal ivory tower, it's real life protection as well. And so when we do have a situation, like the present health situation where people's health is at risk, there are opportunities under some of these laws for escape valves. And so what the EEOC has done with respect to this pandemic is basically to say, look, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, is intended to protect people with health situations, but that can't get in the way of protecting everybody else. And so when there is a real risk that you as a person are going to walk into a workspace and potentially put other people at heightened risk, the employer has the opportunity to come in and say, all right, well, we're going to mitigate the extent to which somebody is potentially going to put their coworkers in danger. And so the way that the EEOC has talked about things, and this is the same reason why businesses and employers have been able to take people's temperature when they come to the door to ask them about their past symptoms, right? They're not trying to get at these questions in order to discriminate against this person and treat them differently than others or what have you. What they're trying to do is figure out whether you are a risk to other people in the workplace. Because if you are, the law allows for an out whereby the employer can say, look, unfortunately, the greater good of everybody who's in here and is potentially exposed to whatever it is you may be coming in with outweighs your individual risk, or I'm sorry, your individual right rather to privacy. And so at the end, again, when it comes down to the vaccine, the EEOC is basically saying, look, to the extent that someone is going to come into the workplace, they're not vaccinated, they are potentially carrying this virus, or they're carrying, they're basically bringing in something from the outside that puts our workforce at risk. We're going to step in as the EEOC, as the law, to say you have the ability to protect the people that work for you. Now, it's a fine line to walk. Obviously, you don't want to go too intrusive. There is usually what we say is you do the minimum you need to do to keep people safe and no more than that. What that looks like can vary from one business to another, and some states like Virginia have started coming out with guidance on ways to make the workplace safer, just in the abstract, irrespective of people's diagnoses and what have you. Things like timeline for allowing somebody who has been exposed or has had the virus to allow them to come back after they've recovered. Things like PPE and keeping things clean and safe, and also things like making sure you don't go too far in the other direction. situation and retaliate against people who are trying to be safe. There was, particularly on the front end of this health situation, there were people who were, raising up the flag and really sending up smoke signals and saying, look, and these are major big companies that I'm talking about, look, nobody's wearing a mask, nothing's being cleaned, nobody's being screened, people are coming back whenever they want to, no questions are being asked. And that tips very much in the, you can't turn your blind eye, because again, the point of these laws is to ensure that things are as safe as possible. So what those laws look like varies from state to state, and of course the feds have their own sort of thing going. But to pivot to your second question of the return to office, a lot of our entrepreneurial clients have been coming to us and saying, look, what do we need to do? What say you, in terms of what kinds of check boxes we need to have on the sheet to make sure, whether that's, for the first time, whether it's daily, whether it's something for the future, what is the story? And the answer to that question will depend a little bit on your geographic location, the type of business you have, and the type of workers that you have, what you have them doing.
It's wow. I mean, just amazing information. I mean, it seems, as an entrepreneur, I mean, on top of running your business, you've got to deal with, figuring out, can you come back? Can you not come back? What are you liable for? What are you not liable for? What can you require? One of the things that we did actually early, mid last year, was we put an RTO kit together, return to office, which is basically CDC guideline posters. And, we were telling our clients, and we actually, a lot of our clients bought these kits where you had the face masks, the temperature, taker, the CDC guideline posters that they would, put everywhere in the office about social distancing and washing your hands, and, if you feel a fever, what to do, or anything like that. But it's amazing to me, just the potential, right, of ramifications of what could happen. So that being said, what happens if, and again, I'm not getting into details. I know that every situation is different, but let's say that you have an employee who refuses, right, to get the vaccine. Then can you allow them back? Can you terminate them? And this is obviously broad stroke. I mean, I know that every situation is different, but what are the ramifications of them, and what can you do?
It's a good question, and it's a question that is still emerging to an extent. This is one of the first situations in which anti-vaxxing has really come up in the past. There's been some resistance to vaccines in the past, but normally it's been on religious grounds, and that may or may not be in play here. I mean, it probably is in play to the same extent it was, with respect to the Spanish influenza epidemic. And so the question really is going to be having a conversation with the subject employee to say, all right, well, let's talk a little bit about why it is you're choosing not to get the vaccine. Is there something that's motivating that? If the answer is what we call a sincerely held religious belief, right? If they belong to, if they have a religious background that for one reason or another precludes them from getting it, well, that's a thornier situation, right? Because we want to navigate that in a way that makes sure that we're not, impinging upon someone's religious liberty, but is also, accounting for the fact that we're trying to keep everybody safe. And there are accommodations that can be made the same way that there are accommodations for anybody who's got a different health situation to the general populace. Those include things like remote work, things like enhanced PPE, separate work sites, different duties. So there are ways around it. Same thing goes, with respect to the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and again, the Americans with Disabilities Act. If they have, a health condition that would make them a poor candidate for the vaccine, yet another, situation in which you'll want to, figure out what's going on, potentially having them speak with their physician. You can't mandate that they speak with this physician perhaps, but that's an option available, making sure that they're educated, that they have a good understanding versus just an off the top of their head, oh, well, my understanding is I can't get it for XYZ reason. And then again, offering those accommodations to the extent they're available. If they're not, you then come down to a risk-benefit analysis, right? Because there is an argument that, okay, well, you may be choosing not to get the vaccine because of the fact that you've got, a genuine reason for doing so. But, that doesn't outweigh, again, the public health consideration. The consideration of, I've got to keep these people healthy. I have a duty to them, not only as their employer, but potentially under law. And there is an argument that if you tiptoe up to that line, if accommodation can't be made, if there's not a way for them to work safely, that if you're considering what we call adverse employment action, whether that's, a demotion, whether it's diminution of hours, or whether it's termination, would that adverse employment activity really be taking place because of the underlying issue, right? The religious conviction or the health condition, or is it done in the interest of public safety because a reasonable accommodation simply can't be come up with? Just as in the abstract, if you've got someone who's got a reading condition, something like dyslexia or cognitive processing issues, and they're a copy editor, you can make a lot of accommodations for that person, but at the end of it, if they're not able to perform what are the essential aspects of their work, even the ADA has an escape valve that says, look, thus far shalt thou go and no further. There is a point at which we have to say this is just not a good fit. So I would advise people, like you said, the situation goes person by person, and I would advise people to speak with their counselor, somebody who is, an attorney who, is licensed in their state, or if it's a matter of federal law, anybody who's got the background knowledge, because it really is a tight consideration, and one that you want to document just to make sure that you say, look, I talked to someone, here are the things we considered, here are the alternatives that were available, and here ultimately is what we chose to do and why, so that if at any point this comes up, right? This person runs to the EEOC, they run to court, they run to under a state statute like the Virginia Human Rights Act, and say bad treatment. I was discriminated against. You've got that documented process to show, no, this wasn't based on anything other than a concern for public health. And that analysis, having that down on paper, goes a long way when it comes to talking to an investigator or talking to a fact finder to say, look, I was acting in good faith. I tried to do the right thing here.
What's amazing though is, if I listen to what you just said and I pick on just one piece of it, the fact that you have to make reasonable accommodation, and that's such a loose term, right? And what it means, accommodation for different positions, right? If you're in the finance world, right? If you're a bookkeeper and you're, working in a company and you decide that you don't want to come back and you want reasonable accommodations, can you work from home to pay bills and invoice clients and do all of that, right? Or can you be forced to be in the office because that's what the owner wants, right? He wants you to be at the desk, you're handling money, right? The checks that come in, right? The invoices need to go out, people have questions. And then you get into sort of that tricky line of what's reasonable accommodation and what's not. And if they come back, right, 2 days a week and work remote 3 days a week. So does that mean you can actually really come back 5 days a week, that you're just trying to, to be at home for 3 out of those 5 days? It sounds like it's such a complicated issue that I don't think that entrepreneurs and owners are going to have a choice. They're going to have to speak to counsel, and you seem to be extremely well versed in that, which is just amazing. It's such a new law as well. I mean, there's old and there's new that has come out as part of all of this. So, can you bring everybody back and, ask them or require them to wear masks? It's one of the questions that, I've seen posed around is, if I have everybody in my office, one, can you require them to come back if some have had the vaccine and some have not? And then if you mandate masks all day long, right? Are you allowed to mandate masks all day long?
Yeah, it's a lot of this comes down to common sense. It really does. I know that you mentioned it's always a good idea to speak with counsel because these issues are complicated, and they are. It's true, and it's always an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So it's a good idea. If you've got counsel, give them a tap. A lot of people, including our firm, if it's a 1 minute check-in or something like that, or a quick off the cuff, question, that's not something that you're going to be breaking the bank with. And oftentimes it's something that's it's so simple, we do it off the clock. But it is a good idea to check with somebody that, particularly if it has to do with not just a general question, but with something in particular, right? A flashpoint, somebody who's got a rub, or somebody who's got an unusual condition. But that being said, there's also, like I say, a lot of common sense that goes into this, because reasonable accommodation, a lot of you see reasonable pop up in our law, particularly our employment law, often because these situations are so different, and because the law doesn't like hard and fast rules, because they want to account for that sort of gray area. And reasonableness is what a reasonable person would anticipate. And so for something like your banker example, right? Oh, do I need to come in? Really, I can do this whole thing from home. Or in a lot of situations, the discretion will be left to the employer. If the employer says, look, I don't care whether you can do it from home. I want you here. I'm the master. You're the servant. Get in here and sit at your desk. That, so long as you can do it safely and within the four corners of the law, is a perfectly fair demand to make. And for those employers who are being more flexible, who are saying, look, to the extent you feel comfortable working at home, we know you can do it in here and we prefer to have you in the office. But if for one reason or another you feel like you want to, stay home for XYZ amount of time, that's fine. We've seen a lot of gamesmanship. Not to throw employees under the bus, there are tons of loyal employees that are chafing to get back in the office and be in person or what have you. And there are just as many of them who work remotely who are doing gangbusters, perhaps working even more than they would have if they were in person. But there is this sort of gray area, middle ground people, particularly those who are caring for small children or for, elderly relatives who are using work from home in a way that their employer might not prefer. And so it's up to the employer to do things like, regular check-ins, hourly audits to the extent employees check their time, things like that, to figure out, look, is work from home a viable option for this person? If yes, no problem. We have clients that have said, you know what, we would never have considered remote work before all of this happened. We didn't have the infrastructure. We were worried about the cost. We pay all this rent. It just wasn't in the cards. But now, because we were forced into it, it's a situation where, this could really work either for all or part, or, some of our workforce, some of the time. It just depends on how things are working. And we have other employers who are saying this must be done in person. It just must, particularly in the service industry, those who work with other, with members of the general public, remote work just isn't an option for them. And the question in that case, because, if you have an employee who's saying, no, I don't want to come back, I don't want to wear the mask all day, et cetera, again, going back to the ADA, if they have a condition where they can't wear a mask all day, there are a lot of other ways to deal with that. Face shields, working in different parts of the building, working in different roles, working back of the house. All of these are options. If somebody's just inconvenienced, one of the questions that we've had come up often is mental health. I'm afraid, I've got the vaccine, or, there's no real reason why I can't come in and work or wear a mask or what have you, but it feels, I don't wanna, I'm concerned. Well, that, unless it's something that's diagnosable, like a generalized anxiety disorder or something that sort of rises to that level, just the fact that you prefer not to, that's not a condition that's covered under law. And again, you've got an HR issue at the end of the story, really. You've got a person who you're asking them to do something, they're saying, I'd prefer not to. And the question is, all right, well, can I either find an adjusted role for you, or is this perhaps no longer a great fit? And we talk about transition and what that looks like. So again, reasonableness is really going to be your lodestone. You look to the law first. Virginia, for instance, has a whole regulation on return to work, all of the things that people must do. And it's many of the things that your firm did in terms of advising people, posters, your distancing guidelines, having tape on the floor or signs on the wall, your PPE they require you to wash down every common surface once a shift. They've got provisions in there about anti-discrimination and anti-retaliation. So not discriminating against people who have a real, issue with the workplace, but also not discriminating against those who are saying, hey, there are these rules out here and you are not following them. That's built in, questions about who can come in and who can't, capacity, all of this. These are hard and fast. You either follow them or you don't. If you're following them, then to a large extent, a lot of your concerns are going to be covered. You're within the four corners of the law that applies. And when you do get these sort of oddball edge cases, gray area questions, applying common sense is oftentimes a great place to start. And whether that's based on information you glean just from the public, whether that's information you get from a professional like an attorney or like a physician, or whether it's just, a matter of sort of speaking with your workforce generally. Communication is so important, particularly now when people feel so disconnected. Making sure that you hear, okay, well, what are the concerns? A lot of these are easy to knock out. We'll just take care of these. Some of these, perhaps, we're going to have to come together one. And what a lot of our clients have done, either because it's required under the Virginia regs, which it is based on the type of business you have, for some businesses, for others not, is they've just come up with a return to work plan that, oftentimes is question and answer. Here's a question you may have, what's return to work going to look like? Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Others are narrative. Here are all the great things that we've done to make you feel safe, make sure our customers feel safe, et cetera. And to the extent you've got a question, look at the plan first. And if that doesn't answer your question, here's our designated person at the company whose job it is to answer questions about the health situation. So all of which is to say, there's a lot that entrepreneurs can do for themselves. And as always, there's a lot that outside professionals have to offer, just to make sure that, hey, if you've got a question, it gets answered.
Well, and I think it's, very important to understand also is that as an entrepreneur, we don't have those answers. And, for example, if the law is extended for, taking care of, children or older parents because daycare is closed, right? Or who knows what's going to happen in the fall. And, we don't really know what the effects of this are going to be when flu season comes back again. And so, Ryan, I think as you pointed out, using an expert, calling an expert, relying on an expert is really critical. And, as SHS, we're a big supporter of local firms. You guys are a local firm and you have that local knowledge. So, Ryan, appreciate you joining us on the podcast. Greatly appreciated. Give us a quick, how can people reach you? How can they contact you if they have any questions and engage you?
Sure, absolutely. You can find us online at lipplawfirm.com, which is LIPPLAWFIRM.com. You can reach out to me directly. I'm at Ryen@lipplawfirm.com. That's Ryen, RYE like Echo, N like Nancy. And you can reach me by phone at 703-783-6157. Be happy to speak with you, see whether we're a good fit to help, and certainly one way or the other, point you in the direction of somebody who can give you the answers you need.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. Ryen Ramus from Lipp Law Firm. Greatly appreciate your time. I have to say, this was just amazing information. Can't be more relevant, can't be more timely. And, again, just given a lot of pause for thought that business owners really need to make sure they're on top of. So, again, greatly appreciate your time. And hopefully, we'll be able to get some more information from you down the road in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks again for having me on.
Wonderful.